The first thing Kieran noticed about the planet Virili was how nothing cast a true shadow. Twin suns hovered on opposite ends of the sky, washing the alien marketplace in a light so strange it made even solid things seem hollow. He moved slowly through the crowd. The alien bazaar was enclosed under a crystalline dome, humming with the voices of over 20 species. Vendors shouted in languages that his translator earpiece struggled to keep up, with offering plasma fruits, singing crystal spheres, even miniature storms bottled in glass. Kieran wasn't shopping. As a pathfinder for the Terran Trade Alliance, his mission was to survey Virili's surface for potential trade hubs and, more importantly, determine whether the locals were safe allies or unpredictable threats. He rounded a corner and heard it. A sharp cry, a scuffle, then a gasp. A small alien girl had been shoved to the ground. Three older beings, taller, armored, mocking, strode off, laughing in low hisses. The girl pushed herself up slowly. Her skin shimmered a deep violet under the sunlight, and her long antennae drooped. Her silvery eyes, dimmed by dust, stared at the ground. She didn't cry. Before he thought about it, Kieran was kneeling beside her. "You all right?" he asked gently. The girl blinked, startled. No one had spoken to her like that before, especially not a human. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then placed her small palm in his. Cold, soft, fragile. "There you go," he said with a smile. "No more falling today." She gave a shy nod, eyes wide. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she whispered. "Kieran," he replied. "Nice to meet you." He stood, gave a small wave, and turned to leave. But she didn't. She followed him. He paused. Where are you going?" "With you," she said quietly. Kieran laughed softly. "You don't even know who I am." "I want to," she replied a little stronger. Kieran looked down at her, those strange glowing eyes. She couldn't have been more than 12 in Earth years, yet something in her expression was old. "Listen, Lyra, I move around a lot. This life isn't safe for kids." "I'm not afraid," she said. "You're the only one who was kind to me." He crouched again, this time with more weight behind his words. "You have to grow, learn who you are, become strong. And if you do, maybe one day we'll meet again." She stared at him long and hard, then nodded. Just once. No tears, no begging. She turned and walked away. That night, back in his ship, Kieran sat alone beneath a dome of stars. The marketplace buzz had faded, but her eyes lingered. That girl, Lyra, why had she followed him? Why did her voice echo in his mind? "She'll forget," he said out loud, trying to convince himself. But in a shadowed alley far from the lights of the marketplace, a young girl with violet skin clutched a broken necklace in her hand, whispering one line to herself again and again. "Come back when you're stronger." And so she would. Someday. Valerix was not a world for the gentle. It was iron and wind pain and silence. No flowers bloomed here. No birds sang. The ground split in violent patterns, and the sky above was always gray, like it was waiting for something terrible to happen. Lyra stood at the edge of the training citadel, her eyes lifted to the black monolith carved into the mountain. This was where the strongest warriors in the quadrant trained the battleborn of Valerix. Creatures from dozens of systems came here to either become legend or die trying. She was barely a shadow among them. Still small, still soft, and still repeating his words like a sacred chant. "Come back when you're stronger." They laughed at her the first week, mocked her accent, her size, her quiet voice. One trainee, a brute with 6 arms and bone armor, shoved her during a trial match and called her Ghostskin. She didn't cry. She never cried again. Each time they knocked her down, she stood back up. Not because she wanted to win, but because she wanted to return. To him. Years passed. Her body changed, shaped by gravity drills, blade duels, and cold nights under thunderstorms. The once shy girl became lean, fast, dangerous. Her skin darkened from constant exposure. Her silver eyes gleamed like twin moons. The soft curls of her childhood now flowed in braided waves down her back. But inside, she held on to one image, a dusty human marketplace, and a hand reaching out with kindness. Kieran. Sometimes during the long nights in the wind tunnels, she would stare up at the lightning-lit sky and imagine his voice. "You're doing well, Lyra," he'd say. "Keep going." She never spoke back, not out loud, but in her heart she answered every time. Her final test came without warning. She was pulled from sleep, ordered into the arena by a faceless elder. "The thunder trial," someone whispered. "She won't last a minute." The arena floor was slick with steam and dust. Dozens gathered above in the observation cliffs cloaked in shadows. Her opponent towered above her, an obsidian-skinned colossus named Varos, known for crushing 3 challengers with a single blow. As the bell sounded, Varos charged. Lyra didn't move. She waited, remembering everything she had learned. How to fall without breaking, how to breathe through pain, how to strike only when the moment was perfect. She dodged at the last instant, rolled under his arm, and kicked off the wall behind him. Her blade, a curved Valaric's fang, found the gap under his neck guard. A single precise strike. Varos fell. The crowd did not cheer. They stared. And then they whispered her name. Not in mockery, in awe. That night she stood alone on the peak of the wind tower, cloak fluttering, watching the sky. She opened her old cloth pouch, the only thing she had brought from Viralai. Inside, an old image sparked faintly, a hologram she had secretly captured years ago. Kieran's face, that same half-smile. She touched it gently. I'm coming back. And for the first time in years, she smiled. The human space station, Oasis 9, orbited quietly near the edge of the serene nebula. It was a place of diplomacy, trade, and caution, a fragile bridge between many species. But that day, the silence was shattered by an alarm. Unregistered ship inbound, a voice rang through the intercom. Unknown origin, signature Valarix. Officers tensed. No warrior from Valarix ever arrived without a reason, and never alone. The docking bay doors hissed open. Out of the vessel stepped a figure in silence. No weapons drawn, no guards at her side, but the air shifted. Her presence was undeniable, tall, cloaked the shine of battle-forged armor, glinting with etched sigils of victory. Her white hair flowed behind her like silk flame. Her silver eyes locked onto one man, Kieran. He stood frozen, datapad forgotten in his hand. The moment her hood fell back, time seemed to stop. His breath caught. Oh shucks, Liraino, and where's her? She didn't smile, she didn't speak. Until she stood only a few feet from him. I've come back. Kieran had faced warlords, pirates, in the vacuum of space. But nothing prepared him for this. The girl from Viralai, barely a shadow in his memory, now stood before him, like something carved from prophecy. Strong, serene, commanding. Lyra, he breathed. I told you I would return. He looked into her eyes and saw it, not the child he'd once helped, but a woman forged by pain, strength, and a promise he never meant to become a destiny. You really did all this because of me? She didn't blink. Because of your words, you told me to find who I was. I did. Kieran looked down. Guilt, awe, something else tangled in his throat. The station commander stepped forward hesitantly. She's requesting official dialogue. Peace terms. Lyra said nothing to him. Her attention was still on Kieran. He cleared his throat. Why now? Because I'm ready, she said, and because I never forgot. Later, in the quiet of the command tower, Kieran stood by the observation deck, watching the stars beyond the nebula swirl slowly. He didn't notice Lyra until her reflection appeared beside his. They look different from here, she said. He turned slowly. You surprised me today, he said. I meant to. He hesitated. You waited all this time. Her voice was soft. You asked me to come back when I was stronger. And you're stronger than anyone I've ever known, he said quietly. She turned to him, and for the first time since she arrived, she allowed herself to smile just a little. I'm not here to ask for your love, Kieran, she said. Just your truth. Kieran looked into her eyes and saw no anger, only resolve. He nodded once. Then here it is, he whispered. I never forgot you either. They stood in silence. And somewhere deep in the station's data banks, an old entry flickered to life. Lyra Busher, clearance approved, status ally, heartline marked. The distress call came from the edge of the collapsed star tunnel, a dead zone where time twisted and radiation danced. The dawn whisper. A human cargo vessel had gone silent. Only one signal broke through, a fragment of static and a child's voice saying, Help! No one else volunteered. The commanders hesitated. The region was unstable, gravity spikes, pirate signatures, maybe worse. But Lyra stepped forward. I'll go, she said, already reaching for her armor. Kieran blinked. You don't even know what's out there. She looked at him calmly. You need someone who's survived worse. He paused, then gave a slow nod. Then I'm going too. The shuttle Orion's light slipped into the mist like a blade into fog. Inside, the controls hummed softly under Lyra's fingers. She guided the ship with calm precision, eyes scanning the sensors. Kieran sat beside her, strapping in medkits and weapons. You ever jumped into a gravity sink? I trained inside magma caverns, she replied, smirking. This is softer, Kieran exhaled. You're still terrifying. I know. The dawn whisper drifted ahead, lifeless, cracked open like a wounded beast. No lights, no heat. They docked. Kieran checked his scanner. Faint life signs, lower deck. Moving slow. They moved in Lyra with a spear slung over her shoulder, Kieran, with a pulse blaster at the ready. Inside, the walls groaned. Ice had formed on the metal, and the lights flickered like nervous eyes. They found them in a maintenance hold, 5 survivors huddled under emergency blankets. 2 were children, pale and coughing. Kieran knelt and gave them oxygen. You're safe now, he whispered. One little girl blinked at him. You came. He smiled. Of course we did. But the danger wasn't over. A deep growl echoed through the hull. Something massive, something alive. From the ceiling above it dropped. A creature of wires, bone, and metal. 4 red eyes burned like lava. A war beast, genetically built, Varnax's creature. It lunged. Kieran fired. Lyra spun into motion, a blur of gold and violet. Her spear flashed. But it wasn't enough. The monster backhanded Kieran into a wall. He gasped for air. Lyra stood between the beast and the survivors, armor cracked, blood trailing down her side. The creature charged. She waited, then leapt, climbing its back, stabbing deep into its spine. It roared, bucked, slammed her into the deck. She didn't rise. Lyra, Kieran shouted, scrambling forward. The monster lifted a claw to finish her. But Kieran ran, roared, and emptied his weapon into its face. With a final shriek, the beast collapsed. Kieran fell to his knees beside her. Stay with me, he begged, pressing a sealant to her wound. Her fingers found his tight, steady. I'm here, she whispered. As the shuttle escaped the collapsing zone with the rescued crew aboard, the stars outside were silent. But inside, Kieran didn't move from her side. He watched her breathe and said nothing. Because now he realized she hadn't come back to prove herself. She came back for him. The stars outside the escape pod didn't twinkle. They watched. The shuttle had been hit by an EMP pulse from a second war beast hidden in the nebula shadows. The crew had made it back. The children were safe. But Lyra and Kieran were drifting. Alone. No power, no signal, no clear path back. Only a whisper of oxygen remained between them and the void. Kieran checked the console again, still dead. He turned to Lyra, who sat across from him, her armor still cracked, a dried trail of blood across her cheek. You really waited all these years? Because of what I said, he asked, his voice soft in the pressurized hush. Lyra didn't look away. Yes. Kieran swallowed hard. I was just trying to be kind to a girl who'd been pushed down. You were, she said gently. But no one had ever been kind before, so I held on. Kieran stared at the floor, guilt blooming inside him like fire in zero gravity. I didn't mean to give you false hope. It wasn't false, Lyra whispered. It was the only thing real. Silence. And then she said the words that nearly broke him. But if you don't feel the same, it's okay. Just tell me. I can take it. Kieran looked up sharply. That's the problem, he whispered. I don't know what I feel. I remember a child. Now you're... He trailed off, shaking his head. Lyra gave a small, sad smile. Time doesn't pass the same for my kind. I became a warrior at 16 cycles. I've seen death, betrayal, glory, loneliness. And through it all, I only ever wanted one thing. What Hannah said to rain on me, she met his eyes. You, not as a savior, not as a goal, just as someone who saw me. Kieran leaned forward, breath shallow. I do see you. I don't know what this is supposed to be, but I know you're not a child anymore. You're incredible. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment. That's all I ever needed to hear. Then a faint tone sparked from the console. Kieran spun around. Wait, that's a pulse. He tapped commands, rerouted minimal energy, boosted the signal. A voice crackled through escape pod Delta 6 respond. We have your signature. Locking coordinates now. Kieran grabbed the mic. We're here. We're alive. Lyra exhaled slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. They weren't lost. They weren't alone. Not anymore. 30 minutes later, a rescue ship locked onto the pod and pulled them in like a hand reaching through a dream. As the medics worked, Kieran stayed beside her, never letting go of her hand. Later, when she was stable and resting in a recovery pod, he sat in the corner staring at the soft rise and fall of her chest. Then he whispered the words she'd waited a lifetime to hear. I love you, Lyra. Even in sleep, she smiled. Somewhere beyond the nebula gates, in a fortress carved from obsidian and silence, A warlord stood before the stars. His name was Varnak. He had ruled a dozen systems with blood and flame, broken alliances, burned treaties. He didn't believe in diplomacy, only dominance. And now he had heard a name whispered across the void. Lyra Valerix returned at the human station. The fire in his war chamber cracked as he stepped forward, breath steaming from beneath a bone-forged helmet. "She's left Valerix unguarded," he snarled to his generals. The girl child who ran with dreams. His clawed hands swept across the map, marking coordinates with glowing fire. "She chose them over us, over blood, over tradition." He leaned closer to the flame. Perfect time to strike. Back on Oasis 9, Lyra was healing. Her wounds at least were. In the medical wing, surrounded by humming machines and white walls, she sat upright for the first time since the battle. Kieran stood by her side carrying a small tray with her favorite drink, mint extract and chelium oil. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm still recovering, not dying." He grinned. "Well, you're about to get spoiled either way." But under his humor was something else. Worry, guilt, love unspoken for too long. She reached for his hand. "You said it," she whispered. He blinked. "Said what?" "You love me." He looked down. "Yeah, I did, still do." She squeezed his hand. "Then don't be afraid to fight beside me, because this isn't over." The alert blared at midnight. The station trembled. A message lit up every console. "Enemy vessel detected. War signature Varnak." The commander scrambled. Troop formations were incomplete. Defenses barely online. Kieran grabbed his gear. Lyra stood already armored. "You're not cleared for combat," he warned. "I wasn't cleared to survive either," she said calmly, strapping on her gauntlets. He hesitated, then nodded. "Let's finish what we started." As the docking bays opened, a monstrous vessel approached spikes along its hull, pulsating red lights like breathing wounds. From within, Varnak emerged, massive, towering, laughing. And then his voice cut through the comms. The little girl and her human toy, how romantic. He stepped forward. "Step aside, Lyra. He's not worth your blood." She drew her spear and stood between Kieran and the warlord. "Then you'll have to go through me." The hangar shook with every step the warlord took. Varnak was a tower of death wrapped in obsidian metal, crowned with the skulls of ancient beasts, his voice like a collapsing star. And Lyra stood in front of him, small, scarred, unmoving. "I warned you," Varnak growled. "Step aside." Behind her, Kieran lifted his blaster. "She's not going anywhere." The warlord laughed. "Then you'll die together." He charged. Lyra met him head on. The clash was thunder and flame. His blade came down like a meteor. She raised her spear in both hands and blocked knees, buckling sparks flying. The floor cracked beneath her boots. Kieran fired. The shots pinged harmlessly off the warlord's shielded armor. Varnak roared and spun, slamming a gauntlet into Lyra's side. She flew across the hangar, armor dented, blood trailing. Kieran ran to her. "Lyra," she rose slowly, breathing hard. "No," she said, "not yet." They fought together. Kieran ducked and weaved, distracting the warlord with precise shots. Lyra struck from the flanks, using speed over brute force. Her silver eyes locked onto every weakness, every breath, every hesitation. But Varnak was old, experienced, and cruel. He faked a stumble, then turned and slashed across Lyra's side. Her scream echoed. Kieran cried out and rushed forward. "No," she shouted, "stay back." But he didn't. He dove in, tackled the warlord's legs, blaster, firing point blank. Varnak stumbled, then backhanded Kieran across the deck. The human hit the wall hard and didn't move. Lyra screamed. Something ancient inside her snapped. She rose, limping, bleeding, and stared into the warlord's eyes. "You said I'd die for him," she growled. "I live for him." She charged. Varnak lifted his blade. She slid under it, turned mid-roll, and drove her spear through his side, deep past armor, into core. He roared. She ripped it free, spun, stabbed again. Varnak fell to one knee. Then a final shot rang out. Kieran, bleeding, gasping, raised his blaster with both hands and fired directly into Varnak's cybernetic eye. The warlord collapsed, silent. The hangar fell still. Then came running footsteps, soldiers, medics, voices shouting. But Lyra heard none of it. She stumbled to Kieran's side, dropped to her knees. His hand trembled in hers. "You didn't stay back," she said, tears streaking her face. "Didn't plan to," he whispered. "Fool. Yours." She pressed her forehead to his. He coughed. "You still didn't say it." She closed her eyes. "I love you." He smiled through pain. "Took you long enough." Then everything went black. The medical bay had never been this quiet. The war was over. Varnak was dead, but Kieran hadn't opened his eyes in 3 days. Lyra hadn't moved from his bedside. Wrapped in a recovery cloak, bandages wrapped tight across her ribs, she sat with one hand pressed against the glass of the pod. She spoke softly every hour. Not to the doctors, not to herself. To him. "You saved me," she whispered one night. Not just from him, from being forgotten, from becoming like them. The machines around her hummed, steady but slow. She closed her eyes, breathing through the pain in her chest. Not the physical kind, the older one, the deeper wound. "I spent so long training, to be stronger, to be worthy." Her hand trembled. "But I was always afraid, not of failing, of being seen and not being wanted." She leaned closer, voice barely audible. "Don't leave me wondering." The next morning, a flicker of motion caught her eye. A twitch, a shift. She stood so fast her knees buckled. Grabbed the panel. The heartbeat monitor had changed. Faster, stronger. And then, Kieran's eyes opened. Slowly, blinking. She gasped, "Kieran." He focused, dazed, confused, then locked on her face. His lips parted. And the first thing he said was, Did you really mean it?" She laughed through tears, every word. Later, as he sat on the edge of the bed sipping water shakily, Lyra placed something in his hand. A small cracked hollow disk. He activated it. An image sparked. A dusty marketplace. A young alien girl kneeling. A human man offering his hand. He looked at her. "You kept this." She nodded every step of the way. He took her hand. "Then here's mine," he said, and held it tight. Outside the station, stars bloomed across the black like fireflowers. Inside, two lives, once pulled apart by fate, began again by choice. No more waiting. No more promises. Just now. The chamber wasn't built for this. It was made for diplomacy, for charts and treaties. But today it felt like a cathedral. Every seat was filled human ambassadors, alien scholars, virilei elders in deep blue robes, even quiet warriors of Valoric standing at attention. Not as soldiers, as witnesses. And in the center stood Lyra and Kieran. They weren't giving a speech. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough. When the applause faded, Kieran raised his hand. "Some of you see this as a political moment," he began. "An alliance, a headline." He looked at Lyra. "But to me, it started with a question." A pause. The room held its breath. "Are you okay?" Murmurs stirred. Some remembered. "She was a child. I was just passing through." I never imagined that small act would echo across the stars. He stepped closer to her. She became a warrior, a force, but also she never stopped being kind. Lyra's silver eyes shimmered, not from tears, from peace. Later that night on the station's upper deck, they sat alone again. The stars stretched out before them like a path. "Where do we go now?" Kieran asked. Lyra leaned into his shoulder. "I've walked in your shadow long enough," she whispered. "I don't want to follow anymore." He turned to her. "Then walk beside me." She smiled. "I already am." In the weeks that followed, they became something the galaxy hadn't seen before. Not just a team, not even just lovers. They were bridges, training new recruits, human and alien side by side, teaching combat but also understanding, showing what unity could look like not through speeches but through action. Kieran once joked, "You're the warrior, I'm the paperwork." She replied then, "You'd better file fast. We've got a planet to build." And she wasn't wrong. On a quiet evening, they sat in Lyra's quarters. She opened a small projection box. A new image appeared, crafted from fragments of both their memories. A girl dusty and bruised in a market long gone. A man kneeling, offering his hand. Kieran looked at it in silence. "You still carry this?" he asked. "To remind myself," Lyra said. "Of what teaches just a shushanadaru." She took his hand. "How far we've come." He nodded, then whispered, "And how far we'll go." They were no longer warriors, no longer symbols. Just two souls sitting in the quiet after the storm. Kieran leaned back on the polished bench of the observation deck. The stars stretched ahead, no longer intimidating. Just beautiful. Beside him, Lyra rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think the stars were watching me," she said. "And now I think they're waiting." He smiled. "Waiting for what?" "For us. To write the rest." The past no longer gripped them. She was not the frightened girl on a dusty planet. He was not the lonely traveler hiding behind duties. They had met in a moment of kindness, and now across years, scars, battles, and silence, that kindness had become something permanent. In the weeks that followed the war, Lyra and Kieran became part of the Virelai Human Joint Council, but only in name. Their real work was quieter. They built bridges, small teams, mixed crews, shared homes on neutral moons, shipyards with translators, children learning two languages at once, laughter in different pitches. One night, as a celebration lit up the skies of Station Mirrodin, a reporter asked Lyra, "What do you call this piece?" She paused, then answered, "The middle of the story." Back on Oasis 9, Kieran returned to his quarters one evening to find Lyra sitting at the table holding a new hollow projector cube. She pressed play. A moment flickered to life. That first day, the marketplace. His hand, her face dirt-streaked confused. Then the two of them walking in different directions. Kieran chuckled. "Why keep watching that moment?" She turned to him slowly. "To remind myself how far we've come." He sat down across from her. "And Idri Yirwan in Rehenta." She reached across the table and took his hand. "We're just getting started." There were no more promises left to make. Only choices. Every day, every breath. And when Kieran looked into her eyes now, he didn't see mystery or prophecy. He saw home. They stepped outside together one last time, under a new sky, not Earth, not Virelai, but something they helped build. And as the wind passed gently through the towers and the stars blinked above like old friends, Lyra whispered the final words of their story. No more promises. Kieran smiled. Just forever.